The letter came in a glossy white envelope, stamped with bold red letters. Final notice. HOA violation. Marcus Carter stared at it, his hands trembling with rage. $250,000, the letter read, listing absurd infractions: grass too long, fence too high, unapproved paint color. But here's the twist no one in that smug HOA boardroom knew. Marcus wasn't just another homeowner. He wasn't some powerless resident they could bully into submission. Because, while they thought they were finding a man into ruin, Marcus Carter was sitting on a secret deed that made him more powerful than every single one of them combined. And when he revealed the truth, their perfect little neighborhood was never the same again. Marcus had lived quietly on the edge of Brookhaven Estates, a wealthy gated community controlled by one of the strictest HOAs in the state. He was a civil engineer by trade, a man who valued peace, privacy, and family over flash. His home wasn't ostentatious, but it was his, and he took care of it with pride. But the HOA didn't see it that way. It started small: $500 fines for overgrown bushes, even though his hedges were perfectly trimmed. Then there were $2,000 penalties for a non-regulation shed, even though Marcus had permits. Finally, an outrageous bill of $250,000 in cumulative violations. The HOA president, a smug man named Gregory Whitfield, laughed when Marcus tried to appeal. "You don't belong here," Gregory sneered. "Maybe once we bankrupt you, you'll finally leave. We're protecting our community from people like you." Marcus clenched his jaw. He had heard those words before. People like you. He knew what they meant. But instead of lashing out, Marcus smiled politely, tucked the violation letter into his jacket, and left the room without another word. Because what the HOA didn't know was that Marcus's late grandfather, a shrewd businessman, had purchased not just one lot, but the entire parcel of land Brookhaven Estates was built on. The HOA had been leasing it under a legal loophole for decades, and that lease, it had just expired. The board grew more aggressive. They hired attorneys. They even sent contractors to fix Marcus's supposed violations, then billed him for the work. Neighbors whispered about him at barbecues. Some joined the attacks. Others looked away, too afraid of the HOA's grip. But Marcus kept calm, quietly gathering documents, land deeds, contracts, tax receipts, and legal records. He hired the sharpest property attorney in the state. Meanwhile, Gregory Whitfield and his cronies escalated. They filed liens against Marcus's home. They threatened foreclosure. One night, Marcus's car was spray-painted with racial slurs. He found the HOA's vice president standing at the corner, smirking. That was the breaking point. Marcus filed his lawsuit, not as a resident fighting fines, but as the landowner suing the HOA for trespassing, fraud, and illegal seizure. When the court summons hit their mailboxes, the HOA board panicked. "This has to be a mistake," Gregory barked in the emergency meeting. "We own this neighborhood." But when their lawyers dug deeper, the truth slapped them in the face. The HOA owned nothing. Marcus's grandfather had never sold the land outright, only leased it for 50 years. The HOA had assumed it was permanent, but the clock had run out, and Marcus now legally owned every square foot of land their houses sat on. The courtroom was packed. HOA members filled the benches, whispering anxiously. Gregory sat at the defense table, pale but still trying to look confident. Marcus walked in, wearing a sharp navy suit, calm as ever. When the judge asked him to present his claim, Marcus laid out thick binders of documents, deeds signed in the 1970s, renewals, expiration clauses, every receipt of property tax he had quietly paid for decades, while the HOA arrogantly ruled the residents. The judge flipped through the documents, frowning deeper with every page. Finally, he turned to the HOA's lawyers. "Is there any evidence contradicting these records?" They shuffled nervously. "No, Your Honor." Gasps filled the courtroom. The judge's gavel slammed. The plaintiff, Marcus Carter, is hereby recognized as the rightful owner of all land parcels comprising Brookhaven Estates. The HOA's authority is null and void. Furthermore, the board is ordered to compensate the plaintiff for damages, harassment, and fraud, totaling $3.5 million. Chaos erupted. Neighbors shouted. Gregory collapsed into his chair, white as a sheet. Marcus simply adjusted his tie and walked out with the quiet dignity of a man who didn't need to gloat. The news spread like wildfire. Headlines exploded. HOA collapses. After landowner revealed to be resident, they tried to bankrupt. Gregory Whitfield resigned in disgrace. 2 board members faced criminal fraud charges. Marcus, now the undisputed owner of the land, called a neighborhood meeting. Residents braced for revenge. Eviction notices, doubled rents, or worse. But Marcus stood at the podium and said something no one expected. "I don't want to destroy this neighborhood. I want to rebuild it into something fair." He announced the HOA was officially dissolved. Homeowners could live without harassment. Fines were forgiven. And instead of an oppressive board, Marcus created a cooperative council where every resident had a voice. Some neighbors cried. Others lined up to shake his hand. Even those who had mocked him before whispered apologies. As for Gregory, he was last seen selling his luxury SUV to cover his legal debts. Marcus stood in his backyard one evening, sipping iced tea, watching. Children play freely without fear of HOA patrols. His late grandfather had once told him, "Land is power, but how you use it defines who you are." And Marcus Carter had chosen to use it for justice.